In this session, we're going to continue talking about defining religion and different approaches to defining religion, different angles on what religion is. And at the end of our previous session, we were talking about two of the authors that you read in the selected readings, Rudolf Otto and Karl Marx, and their takes on what religion is, how it affects people, why people are religious. And today we're going to look at the other two authors that you have read or will read soon in the selected readings, Sigmund Freud and Paul Tillich. So first of all, let's look at Sigmund Freud. Of course, you're probably familiar with him as the father of modern psychology. He wrote in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. And to a lot of people's surprise that have only introduced themselves to Freud through intro to psychology classes, he actually wrote a lot about religion. As he tried to understand and explain the human psyche and things that result out of the human psyche, one aspect that he dealt with in that was religion, because he saw that as such a significant expression of the human psyche. And so what we're going to look at is one of the early explanations that Freud gave about what religion is and the role of religion in the individual's life. But certainly there are many other things that you could read as far as how he developed this philosophy as he went on through his studies and his research. But the excerpt that you've read primarily comes from a book called The Future of an Illusion that he wrote in the 1920s. And so I'm going to work my way through, again, the three questions that you have to work your way through from that reading. The first question was, according to Freud, what are the main functions of religion for religious people? And you may have come up with several things in your list, but primarily those are probably about, first of all, that it functions to give people consolation, that religion functions to console people who are religious, that if things are difficult in life, there is hope. Things can be better. That there's a God who cares about you as you deal with this, that there's a God who's going to make everything okay as far as how this all comes around, but that it offers some sort of consolation. It also offers certain requirements for how to live life. Freud kind of makes the comparison that that religious people are people who want some boundaries in life, who, like children, want to know what's okay to do and what's not okay, what's the limits. And religion is a place that people can go to find those boundaries, those requirements, those stipulations about this is what's okay, this is what's not okay, this is what's safe for you, this is what's not safe for you. You also probably ran across that it offers reward, that religion talks about that if you do these things, then this is what God will offer to you as a result of your obedience, as a result of your commitment to Him. And so there's rewards, there's consolation, there's certain requirements, and there's also an understanding that you'll be provided for in some way, that if things are difficult, that you'll get what you need to get through that. And that may relate to some extent to the consolation. One other thing that he talks about is that it answers questions, particularly questions about where we came from, and that people go to religion to understand answers to questions about their origin, about where we were created, who created us, why we were created, what we were created to do. That religion answers questions about our origins and about our purpose in life. And so people go to religion to have those questions answered. So when you look at that list of things that Freud said in the excerpt that you read about what religion does in people's lives, it offers consolation, it gives requirements for how to live, it offers promise of reward, it answers existential questions about life. That all sounds really good. But then as you read on, what you realize is that Freud is saying, but that's for people who are unhealthy, who don't have an accurate understanding of reality. And you can really start to see that as you look at the information in response to question number 2. How does Freud say people develop their belief in a God? And what Freud says is that basically religion is a childhood neurosis. And what you may remember from an intro to psych class that you had is that what Freud says, and still what psychology today says, is that people develop a neurosis when they can't face reality on reality's terms, when they can't deal with reality. And so what they do is they turn to an alternate reality, a false reality, to help them deal with what's really real. So some people might turn to drugs and alcohol, or some people might turn to sexual addictions, or some people might enter into just their own fantasy world of some sort that makes it easier to get through life because they can't deal with reality on reality's terms. Well, what Freud says in this book, The Future of an Illusion, is that one of those alternate realities that some people turn to is the alternate reality of religion, or of a God, or of a divine realm that they believe helps them to deal with true reality. And so Freud says that there are some adults, that they're grown up, they're in grown bodies and maybe functioning as an adult in an adult world, but inside they haven't grown up emotionally. They're still children. And so they still want that parental figure in their life who answers their questions about things that they don't understand. They still want that parental figure in their life who says, it's going to be okay. It's all going to work out okay. They still want that parental figure in their life that says, if you do the right thing, then this is what you can get. This is the carrot. This is the reward for you. Because those people can't stand on their own 2 feet as adults, they want these childhood needs still met as adults. And if you can't go to your biological parents for that, either because they refuse to do that kind of stuff for you anymore, or they're not present to do that stuff for you anymore, or you just realize as a 40-year-old adult, I can't go running home to Dad and ask him to tell me it's all going to be all right, then Freud says what those emotionally lacking people do is they turn to an imaginary parent. And they call that imaginary parent God. And so they go to God to answer these existential questions, the hard questions in life. They go to this imaginary God and believe that this imaginary God can make everything turn out all right that seems really difficult. They go to this imaginary God who will tell them, this is what you should do and this is what you shouldn't do to make your life happy. Freud, of course, asserts that a mature adult can come to those conclusions rationally. It can come to understand some things about these bigger questions in life through scientific approaches to life. That a mature adult can console themselves. They can offer themselves the things that they need emotionally. And they don't have to turn to an imaginary God. But religious people are not that. Religious people are suffering from a childhood neurosis. I mean, basically, Freud places all religious people on his psychoanalytic couch, and on his chart writes neurotic, because people have developed this false reality to deal with the true reality that they don't want to face just as is, straightforward. Your third question is, in what ways does Freud say the scientific worldview is demolishing the religious worldview? So he's making a case then in that excerpt that you're reading that these aren't just ideas that he's throwing out there about what's problematic with the religious worldview, but that if you look scientifically at this religious worldview, if you look rationally at this religious worldview, it's not measuring up according to Freud's assessment of things. He says, first of all, that science is answering a lot of the questions that we have about, say, origin. Of course, Freud would have been a contemporary of the rise of evolutionary theory. And so he had right there at his disposal to say, you have questions about where we came from, and before we had scientific understanding, these religious myths, these religious stories, gave a way for people to answer questions about where we came from. But now that we have a scientific understanding, and we're gaining a scientific understanding of where we came from, we can start to dispose of those myths. I mean, basically, Freud is saying that all those questions that historically we've relied on religious stories and religious myths to explain, science is explaining that gap of lack of knowledge now. And so there's more that we know because of science, and so we don't need those religious myths, fables, stories, because science can explain so many of these things to us now that in primitive eras, what else could they do but create these imaginary stories to try to understand the world around them? But we have science now to understand the world around us, and we're gaining scientific understanding of the world around us, so we can begin disposing of more and more of these religious myths, according to Freud. Freud says that if you just look rationally at some of the ideas about what religion or God provides, it doesn't measure up. And primarily he talks about that belief that God consoles, protects, makes everything turn out okay for his children. Freud says, just look at life. It doesn't add up. I mean, if you look at a natural disaster, are the religious people better off than the non-religious people? Does it seem that all the religious people are protected more than those who are non-religious or non-believing? It doesn't add up. I mean, if you just think about natural disasters that happen, if there is a religious person that believes in some way they were protected, a spotlight's placed on that. Because it's not that we look at natural disasters and go, once again, all the religious people were protected and all the non-religious people weren't. There's no clear, distinct line, is what Freud says. So how can you say that God, in reality, rationally, that God protects his children, when you cannot see a clear line between his children and not his children in a natural disaster? You know, Freud basically makes an indictment on a father who responds to tragedy as God does. That any human father would do whatever was in his power to protect his children from the worst of circumstances or the worst of catastrophes. But you don't see that across the board with this God as father that religions establish. And so Freud says it just, rationally, it doesn't add up that there's a God protecting people that are religious people. Another argument that he makes, it's kind of coming back around to himself, is that he says, my psychoanalytic theory has basically taken an axe to the tree of the religious worldview. He says, I've explained to you through my psychoanalytic theory why you're religious, that you're inside your children who haven't grown up, and you still want daddy to take care of you. And so you create this spiritual daddy to turn to take care of you. And so even his psychoanalytic theories explain why we have these religious notions, why we have these notions of God. So obviously, Freud is not a supporter of the health of religion or the mental health of religion in people's lives. But he does offer an explanation for that. And again, you can read other works of his that he goes to elaborate explanations of why religious people do some of the things they do based on this childhood psyche that religious people operate out of. I want to turn to Paul Tillich now, the last of the authors that you were asked to read, who takes a much more philosophical approach to what religion is about. Most of what you read in this excerpt is from a book of his that he wrote in the 1950s called The Dynamics of Faith. And again, we'll just work through the questions that you have, the study questions, and I'll try to illuminate those as far as the understanding of what Tillich says about religion. First of all, how does Tillich define religion or faith, and what do you think he means by that phrase? Well, probably it didn't take long for you as you were reading through to see that Tillich says that religion is one's ultimate concern. That religion is, and the broader statement that he uses in other places is, religion is a state of being grasped by an ultimate concern. So what does he mean by that? Well, one of the things that, to kind of put a background to Tillich a little bit, as far as how he started thinking about this idea of ultimate concern, let's go back earlier in Tillich's life. And Tillich was raised in Germany, and he spent most of his early years in Germany, and early years as an adult in Germany before coming to the U.S. And so Tillich saw the rise and the onset of the Nazi movement throughout Germany. And as he watched that from his philosophical mindset, he saw some things going on that were, I guess, the precursors to developing his ideas about what religion is as ultimate concern. He saw people who were Jewish, who, because of their Jewish religion, lost jobs, lost homes, lost freedom, lost family, and many, over 6 million, lost their lives. Everything was sacrificed because of a loyalty to a certain religious belief. He saw people who were Christian during this era of time throughout Europe, and particularly in Germany. And that some of these Christians, certainly not all, but some Christians believed that as Christians, to be true to their faith, they needed to protect and defend and support the Jews and others who were being pursued by the Nazi government. And so there were Christians who sacrificed their jobs, their families, their homes, their freedom, and some even their lives, to be true to what they believed they should do as Christians to help these Jewish people, a Christian resistance movement against the Nazi movement. Some of you might be familiar with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who's a Christian writer that a lot of people have read. He would be one of those people, that he was very involved in this movement, ended up being imprisoned because of his involvement, and ultimately ended up dying in prison. So he saw these Christian people who, because of their loyalty to their religion, sacrificed everything. Then he saw people that were part of the Nazi movement. And there were people that were part of this movement, and as in loyalty to that movement, they sacrificed. They sacrificed sometimes jobs, sometimes families, sometimes freedom to do things a different way that they always had before until they became part of this party. Some of them sacrificed integrity that they had had. Some of them compromised values that they had held for the sake of the party, for the sake of the movement. And so Tillich looked around and he saw these people that they had highest loyalties, whether it was Jewish faith, Christian faith, or the Nazi movement, Nazi party. And for this loyalty, they were willing to make great sacrifice. But it was different for different people. And Tillich started thinking, it's like a religion in their lives. They are deciding this is worth giving your life for. They are deciding that this is worth putting everything into. I mean, that's the idea of worship, is giving worth to something. And these people, whether they were Jews or Christians or Nazis, were giving great worth to some high concern. And when Tillich talks about concern, he's not talking about a worry or fretting, but he's talking about something that's a goal, that's a pursuit, that's a loyalty, that's something that people really care about. And so the idea is that, according to Tillich, everyone is religious by this definition. That everyone has something that's ultimately most important to them. Now, some people have chosen that and can identify it, according to Tillich, but there are people that don't even really realize what their highest loyalty is. But when push comes to shove, everyone, according to Tillich, has something that they'll hang on to the bitter end. He calls that their ultimate concern. He calls that their highest loyalty. He calls that the thing that they would sacrifice all else for. He calls that their religion. So what he means by that phrase is that someone's religion is their ultimate concern, is that someone's religion is that thing that their life revolves around, whether they acknowledge or realize it or not. That someone's religion is that thing that drives their life, whether they realize it or acknowledge it or not. That their religion is the thing that they would sacrifice everything else for when push came to shove. That one's religion is that thing that they'll hang on to the bitter end. So again, by Tillich's definition, all people are religious because he says all people have something, recognized or not, that they'll hang on to the end, that they'll sacrifice everything else for. So obviously there's a lot of things that can be religious. Usually when I ask that in class and I say, let's make a list of all the things that can be religion according to Tillich on the board, someone always says, well, anything can be religion. Because there's all kinds of different things that people give highest loyalty to. And we'll talk about that a little more here in a bit. The second question is, in what ways are promises and demands key elements of religion or ultimate concern according to Tillich? So Tillich says that every ultimate concern involves both demands and promises. Now, what you may have come to understand as you were reading is that he was saying that either written or not, either kind of a written contract or a non-written but understood contract exists between every ultimate concern and every person that gives their loyalty to that concern. And in that contract, that concern makes certain promises to the person. So with traditional religion, that might be kind of clear to understand. Again, in my live classes, I ask students, so let's say with Christianity, what are some of the demands of Christian faith or of Judeo-Christian faith? Or excuse me, what are some of the promises? What are the things that it guarantees, that it promises to you? And so, they'll say eternal life or joy or peace or community or a relationship with God, that these are the promises of Judeo-Christian faith. And then I'll say, okay, but there's also an understanding that you only get those promises if you meet certain demands. What are the demands of Judeo-Christian faith? And so they'll list maybe some of the commandments, or talk about faith, or talk about sacrificing for that religion or worship. But they'll talk about the things that people need to do so that they can receive those promises. But that's true in any ultimate concern. Let's take job. For some people, their job, their career, is their ultimate concern, or Tillich would call it their religion. It's the thing that they give their highest loyalty to. Well, there's reasons why. Because there's promises, right? I mean, either in a contract or just kind of known, there's certain promises that career offers to us. Money, financial security, maybe a good retirement plan, status. There's all kinds of things it offers. And so to receive that, people are willing to meet the demands of that. Time, effort, sacrificing free time, sacrificing family sometimes, sacrificing health sometimes. But they do that to receive the promise that they believe that religion offers them, that ultimate concern offers them of their job. And we also talk about that some aren't the most healthy in the world, like as far as, say, drugs and alcohol. I mean, there are people who, by Tillich's definition, their ultimate concern, their religion, is drugs and alcohol. But there's reasons for that. I mean, there are some promises that drugs and alcohol make to people, right? Promises like numbing the pain, promises like social acceptance, promises like an escape. I mean, there are promises that are made, and people want that. And so for that, they're willing to meet the demands of money, sometimes of loss of reputation, loss of relationship, sometimes even loss of job, so that they can get what they think they're going to get out of drugs and alcohol. They meet the demands to get the promises. So according to Tillich, every ultimate concern makes promises. That's why people make it ultimate. I mean, none of us are entirely stupid when we do this. There are things we think we're going to get out of what is most important to us in life. And we all understand that if you're going to get something out of it, you're going to have to meet some demands to get that. And Tillich says that's what the situation is with ultimate concern. Now, kind of on the coattails of that idea, the third question, what does Tillich mean by idolatrous faith? And what is existential disappointment, and how is it related to idolatrous faith? Well, to kind of keep this thread of promises and demands going, what Tillich says is that a faith is idolatrous. One way it's idolatrous is if you meet the demands, but you don't get the promises of it. I think we could safely say that about drugs and alcohol without stepping on anybody's toes too much, that if you meet the demands of drugs and alcohol, are you ultimately going to get out of it what you want out of it? Are you ultimately going to get the fulfillment or the satisfaction or the escape or whatever it is you're trying to get out of that? No, you're going to come up, that second terminology that he uses here, you're going to come up existentially disappointed. You're going to come up disappointed, not just a disappointment like, aw shucks, but a disappointment in your very existence, a disappointment in who you've become. One of the phrases that Tillich uses that you might have drawn out if you did the reading already is he talks about that an idolatrous faith that brings existential disappointment causes a disruption in personality. And you may or may not have got what he meant by that, but basically saying whatever we make ultimate in our lives, it causes us to become a certain kind of person. If my job is really ultimate in my life, it shapes the person, the personality I become. If a person or a relationship is what's ultimate in my life, then it begins to shape my personality, the person I become. If a certain religion, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, is where my highest loyalty lies, then it begins to shape the person I become. It begins to shape my personality. And what Tillich says is if those concerns, or if one of those concerns is idolatrous, then when it fails, when I realize it's not going to come through like I hoped it would come through, it causes this disruption in my personality. I've become someone that I don't like. I've become someone I don't know what to do with now. I've become someone that I knew how to let my life revolve around my job. But then at 45, when they were bought out by a larger corporation and they cut back and I was one of the people that they cut out and I lost half my retirement, that's existential disappointment. I became someone because of that job that was my highest loyalty. And now who am I without that? I let my life revolve around a relationship, and that's the most important thing in my life. And then that relationship ends. Who am I apart from that relationship? And that's what he's talking about with the disruption of personality, that if something's idolatrous, that it will come up short. It won't provide the promises that we think it's going to provide. And the result of that is a deep disappointment in who we've allowed ourselves to become as a result of that ultimate concern. One other angle that Tillich talks about is addressed in question 4. Many would say that true faith leaves no room for doubt. However, Tillich asserts that doubt and risk are key elements of faith. So how does he say doubt and risk play a key role in faith? I mean, maybe some of you have been in situations where you're questioning or you're doubting something that you've believed in, and people will say, where's your faith? Well, Tillich would say that's a part of your faith, to have doubts and questions. Tillich makes a distinction between faith and knowledge. That if we know something, if we have knowledge about something, then there's not really any room for doubt. We've experienced it, we've seen it, it's been proven to us, it's knowledge, we know. But something is faith when there's a base of knowledge. I mean, Tillich would say knowledge is a part of faith. And so because of some things we know, we're willing to take the risk and enter into what we don't know. And that's faith. Religiously, maybe you see that. We'll say with Christian faith again. Well, there's a base of knowledge there that is indisputable. I mean, there was a man named Jesus that lived in the first century. He was a known teacher in the first century. There was a movement that resulted as a result of his life. I mean, that's knowledge. There's not really any argument about that. But simply because of that knowledge, not everybody puts faith in that to base their life on Jesus and his teachings and some significance of his death and resurrection. But some people do put their faith in that because they know some of these things, or because they know an experience that they have with Christian faith. Then they're willing to enter into what they don't know. How do you really know there's a heaven? How do you really know what it's like? How do you really know what eternal life's like? How do you really know what you're going to be like in the next life, if there is a next life? Well, it's by faith. Nobody can prove that, but people are willing to stake their life on a certain amount of knowledge and risk this, what they don't know. And Tillich says that's the doubt element, what we don't know, but we're willing to still put faith in that thing even because of what we don't know. I mean, my guess is if Christian faith is valid, and if whatever you believe about Christian faith ultimately is what comes around in the end times, then some of you, even if you think you've had a lot of faith, you're probably still going to go, phew, it was true. Because there's probably an element that you can't know. You haven't seen it. The other example that I use in a more secular sort of sense is the example of marriage. When two people get married, hopefully, there's a foundation of knowledge underneath that. I mean, hopefully you know the person. You've had some experiences with that person. There's some things that you know about them that cause you to enter into the unknown with them of the future. And when two people stand in front of a crowd of people and they promise to love one another in sickness and in health, whether they're rich or poor, till death parts them, how do you know that's true? Well, you have a base of knowledge that causes you to decide it's worth the risk on that person, but you don't know. I mean, in our culture, 50% of those people that make that promise, it doesn't work. They don't follow through. But we're still willing to enter into the unknown because there's a base of knowledge that we do have. And so we're willing to risk on what we don't know because there's some things that we believe we'll get from that relationship with that person. There's some promises, and so we're willing to put faith in that based on what we know. We're willing to put faith in what we don't know so that we can get the promises of what we believe that relationship can give us. We're willing to meet the demands to try to get the promises of what we believe that relationship will get us. I mean, a marriage ceremony is a great example of faith by Tillich's definition. Taking a base of knowledge and entering into the unknown based on what you know. So doubt is a part of that, and risk is a part of that. But if you have a base of knowledge that causes you to decide it's worth the risk, if there's enough knowledge to enter into the doubt, then Tillich says that's a person's faith when they're willing to step into the unknown. Well, the definition that I want to work with in class, and we'll refer to throughout the class from this point on about religion, is a definition that's really kind of a corollary of Tillich's definition. This is in a religion textbook, and even though the author doesn't give credit to Tillich, I think he would have to if you sat and talked with him about this definition of religion. And so, again, this is a definition that we'll use based on Tillich. And that definition is that religion is human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy. That religion is human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy. And as we talk about what that definition means, I think you'll start seeing how much this relates to Tillich. I mean, even just that ultimacy word begins to point that out for us. But let's break down the definition. It's human. Religion is a human phenomenon. I mean, if you're attentive to this, this department, this religious studies department at Missouri State University exists in the College of Humanities and Public Affairs. The study of what it means to be human. And one aspect of the human phenomenon is this phenomenon of religion. It's a human thing. And so religion, as this human phenomenon, might be about an individual human, or it might be about a group of humans. And you'll find different religious expressions in both those realms of either individual or group. The things that are done religiously are human activity. The rituals that people perform, the stories, the myths that people tell, those are human activity. And so when we look at religious studies in this realm, in this discipline here at the university, we're not looking at the activities of gods and deities. We're not looking at a theological understanding of religion. We're looking at the activity of human beings in this human phenomenon of religion. And what you find in any religious expression is kind of an understanding of what it means to be human. What's the value of humanity in the bigger scheme of things? And different religions give different value to humans in relation to nature, in relation to the divine, maybe even in relation to one another as humans. And so every religion defines what it means to be human. So it's human. It also involves transformation, change. And the idea is that there is a situation or a predicament in life from which change is necessary. There's a situation or predicament in life from which change is necessary. You feel like there's a hole. You feel like there's a gap that needs to be filled. There's a chasm that needs to be crossed. You feel like you're just not measuring up. If you look at every major religion, they talk about like the major problem that humanity deals with. And if you look at the monotheistic religions of Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, the situation, the predicament in life is that people are sinful. If you look at religions like Hinduism or Buddhism, the predicament is that humans are caught in this unending cycle of rebirth, that it's exhausting to the soul. That's the predicament from which change is needed. And so religion outlines a process or a means of transformation. I mean, when you look at religions like Hinduism or Buddhism, what's involved there is how you transform from this predicament of continually caught in the cycle of reincarnation to some freedom from that predicament. If you look at the monotheistic religions, there are processes and means by which people begin to move from this predicament, this situation of sinful human, to freedom from that predicament. So there's a process or means of transformation. And then there's a state of existence that follows that transformation. Freedom from unending rebirth. Freedom from lives of sin and the results of sin in the world around us. That there's an ultimate kind of goal of this transformation. So it's human transformation in response to perceived ultimacy. Well, let's start with ultimacy first. And that's where this definition ties back in with Tillich. What's ultimate in someone's life? What's most important? What drives their life? That this ultimacy is the focus of someone's life, it's the center of someone's life. And this focus, as we've kind of already alluded to, it might be spiritual or supernatural, but it might be physical, material, having nothing to do with the spiritual at all. What's ultimate to someone might be someone that's in human flesh. What's ultimate might be a job. What's ultimate might be a bottle or a can of something to drink. But that whatever's ultimate can be this variety of things that Tillich addresses that we'll continue to build on here in a little bit. But then this definition sticks in this word of perceived ultimacy. That for the person who gives their loyalty to this religion, this thing that brings about human transformation for them, that moves them from a state of dissatisfaction to a state of satisfaction in some way, that it's something that that person perceives as ultimate. I might not perceive it as ultimate. You might not perceive it as ultimate, but they do. And the thing that I focus my life on, the thing that drives my life, I perceive that as worthy of ultimacy in my life. You may not. No one else in the world may. But to the adherent to that belief system, that thing, whether natural or supernatural, whether physical or spiritual, is perceived as ultimate by the one giving their allegiance to that. And so again, a lot of different things can be considered religion. And we're going to kind of lean back into Tillich's theory a little bit to talk about how he sorts that out. Because for a lot of us that give some credibility to religion, either as trying to understand it as a human phenomenon or because of a personal commitment to it, it seems like a pretty watered down thing to say that God and drugs and alcohol and all kinds of other things could be religion. And so we're going to look at this idea of perceived ultimacy more as we move into our next session.